Now, if you continue to live in a violent situation, it becomes the order of the day and you get numb to it. That's the view of conflict transformation facilitator Oscar Siwali. He's worked in a number of countries to help build peace, and he says there's a lack of capacity in South Africa to deal with conflict in communities. He joins us now live to discuss this further. I mean, the situation in South Africa is dire, Oscar. So I wonder, yourself and your team running SADRA, and how you approach situations of conflict and violence in the communities, hoping to change them when, as I mentioned, the situation in this country is quite bad.
Thank you very much. The situation in South Africa is bad and it's concerning. But what we tend to forget is that within the South African communities are structures that were designed in the 80s so that they can work within the communities to stabilize communities. And as an organization, we prioritize those structures. We build the capacity of those structures. What we have discovered, based on the research done by the IOM after the 2010-2012 xenophobic attacks, as well as the NDP, those documents both identify the need for capacity building in communities, especially with regards to conflict resolution skills. And so if one's focus is based on building the capacity of communities in terms of peace building skills, then we will have a better shot at creating peaceful communities. We are not going to be able to do this as government alone. It cannot be done by SAPS alone. It cannot be done by any other way. It has to be a partnership between the police services as well as the communities. The structures are there. They need capacitating and they need to be helped in terms of the infrastructure that they might need to do a better job. I think we underestimate the work that they can do, and that's what SADRA specializes in. We train community leaders throughout the country, and we capacitate those community leaders with conflict resolution skills, with mediation skills, with understanding violence and the cycles of violence, understanding issues of trauma, understanding issues of human rights. So building their capacity helps to build better communities. So that's what we tend to focus on.
Now, building capacity is very important, as you've just mentioned, but what about communities, Oscar, where people have become numb to the level of violence that they experience? People will find it normal on a daily basis to be making their way to the taxi to go to work and then be dodging bullets at the same time and not really finding the urgency to want to change things around their immediate surroundings. How do we deal with communities that have come accustomed to this way of life, and also the lack of accountability of the criminals that continue to run wild in these streets and have become ever so brazen?
Thank you. We are on the edge of a society that will become totally numb to violence. And if we do not act now, if we do not move now, it's going to be too late. Because when you engage communities, you do discover that people are used to the levels of violence that are there, and this goes way back. I mean, if you go back to the 80s, right through to the 70s, in fact, you are able to see the cycles of violence that have come this far. And as a nation, we have to go back that far in order to fix things. I think the thing that we need to recognize about South Africa is the fact that even though we have not been at war, but in general, South Africa has all the signs of a country that in its entry into democracy, you may say we have had a war, but we have not had a war. Although the signs are there, which makes most people to think that we are a peaceful country, and yet we are not. And so all the signs that we see and the levels of violence, they are because we have not dealt with the issues when we entered our new democracy. Our TRC did not go as much And in most countries where a country had been at war, whether it was a civil war or an outright war, as in places like South Sudan, after the war, when all the parties come together, there are peace-building strategies. And we have not entered into that level. We had a period of the TRC, and we cut things very short. And so when we're looking at communities right now, they actually mirror where we come from as a nation. And so in communities, one of the things that are critical at this point, which is an encouragement that we give to community leaders and especially to church leaders, is to lead the communities in restorative approaches where it's not just about resolving the conflicts, it's not about mediating the conflicts, but it's about looking at the issues of violence, giving individuals spaces to be able to reflect on where they are at, on how much harm has happened within their families, and giving people space to deal with the traumas that they carry from the old past. And you will find that in most situations, there are a lot of people who are carrying pain. And most of these engagements that we hold, there's never a lack of tears and pain that people pour, not just because of the present, but it goes way back into the past. And so there's a need to do more work within communities. And I think it's very sad that in a country like ours, the budgets are not there to do peace building work. They are not there in the private sector. They are not there in the government sector. You have to be scrambling to find money to do peace building work. And yet the need is really, really a desperate one. Let me give you an example of during the COVID period, gangsterism being very rough, and the gang war in the Cape Flats, as you will remember. And we took a group of women from Manenberg, from Gugulethu, from Nyanga, which are really high-level violence areas. And we got the women to reflect on the impact of violence in their communities just during the COVID period. And I tell you, we had a painful 3 days of reflection as women and shared the stories of where they find themselves in their communities, almost trapped in cycles of violence where people have to sleep on the floor because shooting goes 24 hours a day. The levels of violence in our country are concerning, but I think the capacity to build peace is just there, untapped, and it needs to be used. I think that's where we are at. And if we can have 10 organizations like ours, we would begin to see a difference in South Africa.
How much of a difference would it be, given the fact that the scourge of corruption in the country is so rife? I think one of the things that is important here that we need to note is that corruption within the police system, for example, has also got a huge impact on the way in which violent situations are dealt with. But I mean, this is a part of the conversation that you and I will have to continue at some stage. We have run out of time. Oscar Siwali, thank you very much for your time this morning. He's the director of SADRA Conflict Transformation, speaking about creating capacity to promote peace in various communities that have